Are you seriously bringing this up at dinner? That was what my daughter-in-law said to me when I asked, calmly, over pot roast and green beans at her dining table, why I had not been told that the restaurant I helped pay for was already serving customers. She said it with a smile. The kind of smile that is meant to make the person on the receiving end feel unreasonable. I did not feel unreasonable. I felt like a man who had written a check for $275,000 and had been quietly escorted out of his own investment. My name is Walter. I am 64 years old. I live alone in a 3-bedroom colonial in Wilmington, Delaware, the same house I bought with my wife, Diane, in 1991, back when the neighborhood was still half farmland and the commute into Philadelphia felt like an adventure rather than a chore. Diane passed away 5 years ago from pancreatic cancer. It was fast, 11 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. I still keep her reading glasses on the nightstand because throwing them away would mean accepting that she is never coming back to finish that Agatha Christie novel she dog-eared at page 212. I spent 33 years working as a civil engineer for the state of Delaware. Bridges, mostly. I inspected them, evaluated their load capacity, wrote reports about their structural integrity. It was not glamorous work. Diane used to joke that I was the only man alive who could make concrete sound romantic. But I loved it because it was honest. Numbers do not lie. Stress fractures do not hide. A bridge either holds or it does not. And if you pay attention to the data, you will know which one long before anyone drives across it. I retired at 61 with a state pension and a savings account that Diane and I had built over 3 decades of modest living. We had never taken extravagant vacations. We drove Hondas until the odometers rolled past 200,000. We packed lunches, and when Diane got sick, we had enough to cover what insurance did not without touching the principal. After she passed, I had just over $400,000 in savings, a paid-off house, and a pension that covered my monthly expenses with room to spare. I was, by any reasonable measure, comfortable. My son, Marcus, is 36. He is the kind of person strangers like immediately. Warm handshake, easy laugh, the ability to make anyone in a room feel like they are the most interesting person in it. He got that from Diane. He certainly did not get it from me. I am the man at the party standing near the wall, holding a glass of water, waiting for an acceptable moment to leave. Marcus married a woman named Jocelyn 8 years ago. She was working in hospitality management when they met, running the front-of-house operations at a boutique hotel in Philadelphia. She was sharp, organized, ambitious. I respected her. Diane adored her. At the wedding, Diane leaned over to me during the reception and whispered, "He found someone who will actually make him follow through on things." She was right about that, though I have come to understand that following through and being led are not always the same thing. 3 years ago, Marcus came to me with an idea. He wanted to open a farm-to-table restaurant in the Brandywine Valley, just outside Chadds Ford. He had been working as a sous chef at a well-regarded restaurant in Philadelphia for 6 years, and he believed he had learned enough to run his own kitchen. He had scouted a location, a converted stone barn on a 2-acre lot that had previously been an antique shop. The building had good bones, he said. The area had money. The concept was sound. All he needed was capital. He brought me a business plan. It was 23 pages long, printed on heavy stock paper, bound with a plastic spine. Jocelyn had helped him put it together, and I could see her hand in it. The financial projections were detailed. The market analysis was thorough. The timeline was ambitious but not delusional. I read it twice, once at the kitchen table, and once in bed that night with Diane's reading glasses sitting on the nightstand beside me, as if she might pick them up and read along. Marcus asked for $300,000. I negotiated him down to $275,000, not because the 5% mattered financially, but because I wanted him to understand that this was a transaction, not a gift. I suggested we put together a simple agreement, nothing elaborate, just a document that outlined the terms. My contribution, the expected timeline, a basic repayment structure, and a clause that kept me informed of major business decisions. Marcus looked at me across the kitchen table with an expression I recognized from his childhood. The same face he made when I told him he could not go to a sleepover until his homework was finished. "Dad," he said, "we are family. You do not need a contract with your own son." I should have insisted. I know that now. But there is a particular kind of guilt that attaches itself to a widowed father, a feeling that you must be softer than you were before because the person who balanced your firmness is gone. Diane would have insisted on the contract. She would have smiled and said, "Sweetheart, we love you, and that is exactly why we are putting this in writing." But Diane was not there, and I was trying to be both parents at once, which meant I was doing neither job particularly well. I agreed to proceed without a formal contract. What I had instead were emails, detailed emails in which Marcus described the arrangement, my role, the expectation that I would be consulted on significant expenditures and kept in the loop on the progress of the build-out. I saved every one of them. The engineer in me does not throw away documentation. For the first 8 months, things went well. Marcus called me every Wednesday evening. He sent photographs of the renovation, the original stone walls being cleaned and repointed, the open kitchen taking shape, the reclaimed wood bar being installed along the far wall. He was excited in a way I had not seen since he was a boy building model airplanes at the dining room table, glue on his fingers, talking a mile a minute about wingspan ratios. Those calls were the best part of my week. I would pour myself a bourbon after we hung up and sit in the living room and think, this is what it was for. All those years of packed lunches and sensible cars, this is what the money was supposed to do. Then Jocelyn took over the business side. Marcus explained it to me on a Wednesday call that was shorter than usual. Jocelyn had quit her hotel job to manage the restaurant full-time. She would handle the vendors, the books, the staffing, the permits. Marcus would focus on the kitchen, the menu, the food. It made sense on paper. Jocelyn had management experience. Marcus was a chef, not an administrator. Division of labor is a reasonable thing, but after Jocelyn took the reins, the Wednesday calls became shorter, then bi-weekly, then monthly. Then they stopped being calls at all and became text messages. Brief updates, construction on track, health inspection passed, menu tasting went well. No details, no photographs, no questions about my opinion on anything. I told myself this was natural. The business was getting busier. My son was under pressure. I did not want to be the father who called too often, who hovered, who made his adult child feel surveilled. I had read enough articles about overbearing parents to know the script. Give them space, trust the process, let them come to you. Except they did not come to me. What came to me were invoices, forwarded from Jocelyn's email with no accompanying message, just a subject line that read FWD, invoice and an attachment. The first few times, I paid them promptly. A lighting supplier, a linen company, a commercial refrigeration outfit, reasonable expenses for a restaurant under construction. But by the 4th month of receiving invoices with no context and no conversation, I began to feel less like an investor and more like an ATM with a Delaware address. The last invoice arrived on a Thursday morning in September. It was from a company I did not recognize, a firm called Apex Hospitality Solutions, for $16,000, described only as consulting services. I called Marcus. The call went to voicemail after 2 rings. I called again that afternoon. Same result. I texted him. No response until the following morning, when he replied with 4 words. Jocelyn can explain it. I did not call Jocelyn. Instead, I drove. The restaurant was 45 minutes from my house, south on Route 1, and then west through the kind of rolling countryside that looks like a painting in October. The trees along the Brandywine were turning, gold and copper, and a red so deep it looked almost deliberate, as if someone had chosen the palette. Diane would have made me pull over to take a photograph. I kept driving. I found the place easily. The stone barn sat back from the road behind a gravel parking lot that had been recently graded. There was a sign by the entrance. Hearthstone. Clean, modern lettering on a dark green background. I had not been consulted on the name. I had not known there was a name to be consulted on. The restaurant was open. Not about to open. Not soft launching next month. Open. There were cars in the lot. A couple walking in through the front door, the woman adjusting her scarf. Through the windows, I could see tables set with white linens and candlelight, a server carrying a tray. The bar I had seen in Marcus's photographs 8 months ago, now polished and gleaming, with people sitting at it drinking wine. I did not go inside. I sat in my car in that parking lot for 20 minutes, with the engine running and the heater on, watching strangers eat in a restaurant that existed because I had spent 3 decades inspecting bridges and packing lunches and driving Hondas past 200,000 miles. I counted the cars. 14. On a Thursday evening, the place was doing business. My son's dream was alive and functioning, and apparently had been for some time, and no one had thought to mention it to the man who made it possible. I drove home. I poured a bourbon. I did not drink it. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at it and thought about what Diane would have said. She would have said, "Walter, do not react. Investigate." So I investigated. I went through every email, every invoice, every text message, every financial record I had related to Hearthstone. I printed them out and spread them across the dining room table, the way I used to spread bridge inspection reports across my desk at work. I organized them chronologically. I cross-referenced amounts. I flagged inconsistencies. It took me 3 days. Here is what I found. My original contribution of $275,000 had been deposited into the restaurant's business account over a series of transfers between April and October of the prior year. The total disbursements from that account, based on the invoices I had been forwarded and the bank statements Marcus had shared with me during the good months, exceeded my contribution by approximately $41,000, which meant either the restaurant had taken on additional financing I did not know about, or money was coming in from operations that had never been reported to me. The invoices from Apex Hospitality Solutions appeared 5 times over 7 months, totaling $52,800. I had never heard of this company before the September invoice. No one had ever mentioned it in a Wednesday call or a text message or an email. I called a friend of mine, a man named Ray who had retired from forensic accounting at a firm in Wilmington and now spent his time fishing off the coast of Rehoboth Beach. I asked him to lunch. He accepted. We met at a crab house near the marina. I brought my documents in a manila folder. Ray ate his sandwich and read for 20 minutes without speaking. Then he took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and said, "Walt, do you know who runs Apex Hospitality Solutions?" I said I did not. "You should find out," he said, "because somebody is eating real well off your retirement." It took Ray less than a week. Apex Hospitality Solutions was registered in Pennsylvania. The principal officer was a man named Derek Sims. Derek Sims was Jocelyn's brother. I had met him once, at Marcus and Jocelyn's wedding, a tall man with an expensive watch who spent most of the reception on his phone. According to his LinkedIn profile, which I found by searching his name on the computer in my study, his professional background was in car dealership management. He had no experience in hospitality consulting. None. Not a single line on his resume that would justify a $52,800 consulting engagement with a startup restaurant. There was more. Through the invoices I had been forwarded, I was able to identify a pattern. The payments to Apex were categorized as pre-opening consulting during months when the restaurant was supposedly still under construction, but the restaurant had clearly been open for at least 2 months before I drove out there in October, which meant either the consulting had continued past the pre-opening phase without justification, or the invoices had been backdated, or both. I was not finished. Through a contact at the county assessor's office, a woman I had worked with years ago on a bridge project near Kennett Square, I was able to review the lease for the property. The lease was signed by Marcus alone, not Marcus and Jocelyn jointly, not a corporate entity with liability protection. My son, personally, carrying the full weight of a 10-year commercial lease on a property he could not afford to lose. If Hearthstone failed, Marcus would be on the hook for every remaining month of that lease, and Jocelyn, the person managing the money, had no financial exposure whatsoever. I sat with this knowledge for 5 days. I did not call Marcus. I did not call Jocelyn. I did not call Ray. I sat in my house and thought about bridges. Specifically, I thought about what happens when you discover a structural deficiency in a bridge that is already carrying traffic. You do not close it immediately unless there is imminent danger. You do not ignore it. You develop a remediation plan. You gather your data. You schedule a meeting. And then you present your findings clearly, calmly, and without drama. Because drama does not fix cracks in concrete. Evidence does. I called Marcus on a Sunday morning. He answered on the 4th ring. His voice had the particular quality of someone who knows they have been avoiding a conversation and is tired of the effort. "Marcus," I said, "I would like to meet with you and Jocelyn at the restaurant this Tuesday at 2 o'clock before dinner service." This is not a request. There was a silence long enough that I could hear a bird singing outside his window. "Okay, Dad. I will need Jocelyn there." Another silence. "I will make sure she is." I arrived at Hearthstone at 1:45 on Tuesday. The parking lot was empty. The restaurant did not open for dinner until 5. I walked through the front door for the first time. The space was beautiful. Marcus had done remarkable work. The stone walls had been left exposed, warmed by soft lighting that made the whole room feel like the inside of a lantern. The bar was even more impressive up close. A single slab of reclaimed chestnut, smooth as glass. The open kitchen was visible from every table, gleaming stainless steel and copper pots hanging from a rack above the pass. My son had built something genuinely special. I wanted to feel proud. I wanted to feel only proud. But pride is difficult to sustain when it is sitting next to betrayal. Marcus and Jocelyn were waiting for me in a small office behind the kitchen. Marcus looked like he had not slept well. His eyes were red at the edges, and he was wearing the same flannel shirt I had seen him in the last time we had a video call, 3 months earlier. Jocelyn looked polished. Hair pulled back, light makeup, a professional blouse. She looked ready for a performance review. I sat down across from them. I placed my manila folder on the desk. I opened it. "I would like to go through some things," I said. What followed was an hour and 40 minutes that I will not recount in its entirety because it belongs to my family. But I will share the shape of it. I started with the opening. I asked when Hearthstone had begun serving customers. Jocelyn said late July. I asked why I had not been told. Marcus said they had planned a soft opening first, and were going to invite me to the official grand opening. I asked when the official grand opening was. They looked at each other. There was no official grand opening. The soft opening had simply become the opening. "So the restaurant has been operating for approximately 3 months, I said, and no one informed me. Jocelyn said they had been overwhelmed. Marcus said he kept meaning to call. I let the silence after that statement sit for a moment because silence, in my experience, communicates disappointment more effectively than words. Then I moved to the invoices. I laid out the 5 Apex Hospitality Solutions invoices in a row across the desk. I asked Jocelyn to explain what consulting services her brother had provided to Hearthstone that justified $52,800 in fees. Jocelyn's composure shifted, not dramatically. A tightening around the jaw, a slight adjustment of her posture. "Derek helped with the initial business development," she said. "Vendor negotiations, lease review, operational workflow. Derek manages a car dealership," I said, "in Norristown. He has broad business experience. He has no hospitality experience." I checked. Marcus was looking at his wife, not at me, at her, and there was something in his expression that told me this was not the first time he had heard a version of this conversation, but it might have been the first time he had heard it with documentation on the table. "I did not approve these payments," I said. My emails with Marcus clearly stated that significant expenditures would be discussed with me. $52,800 is significant. Marcus signed off on the consulting arrangement, Jocelyn said. I looked at my son. "Did you?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Then, I signed off on bringing Derek in to help. I did not know the total amount until later. "How much later?" He did not answer. I let that hang in the air. Then I said, "The lease for this property is in your name alone, Marcus, not jointly, not through an LLC. You are personally liable for a 10-year commercial lease, and the person managing your finances has been directing money to her own brother for services she cannot substantiate." The room was quiet. Jocelyn's jaw was set. Marcus was staring at the desk. I could hear the refrigeration units humming in the kitchen. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I have never believed that volume improves an argument. What I said was this: I want a full accounting of every dollar spent from the business account since inception. I want a repayment plan for the Apex invoices. And going forward, any expenditure over $3,000 requires my written approval. These are not negotiable terms. They are the minimum conditions under which I will continue to support this business. Jocelyn said she needed to consult with her accountant. I said that was fine. I gave her 10 days. Marcus walked me to my car. Jocelyn stayed in the office. The afternoon light was coming through the trees, and the parking lot smelled like fallen leaves and wood smoke from somewhere down the road. "I am sorry, Dad," he said. "I know. I should have told you about the opening. I should have caught the thing with Derek." Yes, I was embarrassed. The first few months were rough. We were losing money. I did not want to come to you and say the thing you gave up your savings for was failing. I looked at my son. He was 36 years old, and he looked, in that moment, like the 12-year-old who had broken my workshop window with a baseball and spent 2 hours pretending he did not know what happened before coming to me in tears at bedtime. That was the thing about Marcus. The truth always came out eventually. It just took him longer to get there than it should. A father who cannot hear bad news from his son is not a father worth trusting, I said. And I have always wanted you to trust me. He nodded. He put his hands in his jacket pockets and looked at the tree line along the edge of the property. The food is good, Dad. Really good. People are coming back. I believe you. Will you come for dinner? Not tonight, but soon. I will cook for you myself. I would like that. I drove home on Route 1 with the windows cracked because the evening was warm for October and the air smelled like the kind of autumn Diane used to love. She would drag me to every orchard and pumpkin patch within 50 miles of Wilmington, and I would pretend to be inconvenienced and secretly love every minute of it. I thought about her the whole drive home. I thought about what she would have said if she had been in that office with me. She would have been tougher than I was. She would have looked Jocelyn straight in the eye and said, "That is not how we do things in this family." And Jocelyn would have listened, because everyone listened to Diane. The accounting arrived on day 9. It came as a PDF attached to an email from Jocelyn's accountant, a woman named Sandra Chen, whose name I did not recognize. The document was 18 pages long. I printed it out and spent a full day going through it, with Ray on the phone. The total amount paid to Apex Hospitality Solutions was $52,800 across 5 invoices. An additional $9,200 had been categorized under miscellaneous consulting that Ray traced to the same payment routing as the Apex invoices, bringing the total to $62,000 in payments to Jocelyn's brother that I had not approved and that had no corresponding scope of work or deliverable documentation. The repayment proposal was structured as monthly installments over 24 months, drawn from the restaurant's projected revenue. Ray said the terms were acceptable but conservative. I accepted them with one amendment. The payments would increase proportionally if the restaurant's quarterly revenue exceeded projections by more than 15%. Jocelyn agreed. She did not sound happy, but she agreed. What happened after that was not a Hollywood ending. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful group hug. What happened was slower and more ordinary than that, which is how real repair tends to work. Marcus and I started talking again. Not every Wednesday, the way we used to. Sundays now, usually in the early evening after dinner, service prep was done and before the rush started. The calls were shorter and more careful than they had been in the beginning. He did not share everything the way he used to, and I did not ask for everything the way I used to want to. But what he did share was honest. And honesty, even in small doses, is worth more than enthusiasm that hides the truth. He told me the restaurant had lost money in the first 4 months. He told me there had been staffing problems, a head server who quit without notice, a dishwasher who was stealing liquor. He told me he and Jocelyn had argued about money every week for months before my visit, and that my showing up with documentation had not caused a crisis so much as it had forced a crisis that already existed to the surface. I told him what I tell anyone who will listen. You cannot fix what you refuse to look at. And looking at it does not mean you have failed. It means you are paying attention. The repayments began arriving on the 1st of November. They have arrived on the 1st of every month since then, without exception. I keep a ledger. Old habits. In December, Marcus invited me to the restaurant for dinner. Not a special occasion. Just a Tuesday evening, one of the slower nights. He seated me at a table near the bar, the one with the best view of the open kitchen, and he cooked for me himself. A roasted beet salad with goat cheese from a farm down the road. Pan-seared trout with brown butter and capers. A chocolate tart that Diane would have eaten 2 of. The food was extraordinary. My son was talented in a way I had always believed, but had never been shown so directly. Jocelyn came to my table near the end of the meal. She sat across from me and said, "The books are in order. I want you to know that." I said, "Thank you. Derek's contract was terminated in October." "I know." She looked at me for a moment, and I saw something I had not seen before. Not warmth, exactly. More like acknowledgement. The recognition that I was not a passive old man who could be managed with forwarded invoices and polite deflections. That I was someone who would sit quietly, read the documents, and hold people accountable without ever raising his voice. "Marcus respects you," she said. "More than you probably realize. I know that too." She stood up and went back to the front of the house. I finished my tart and watched my son through the pass window, moving in his kitchen with the confidence of a man who knows exactly what he is doing. The kitchen was his. The food was his. The dream was his. I was simply the man who had made it structurally possible, the way I had spent 33 years making bridges structurally possible, without anyone driving across them ever knowing my name. I was fine with that. What I was not fine with, and what I refused to be fine with, is being excluded from the knowledge of what my contribution built. I do not need my name on the door. I do not need a plaque or a ceremony or a toast, but I need to know. I need to see the monthly numbers. I need to approve major purchases. I need to be treated not as a source of capital, but as a person who cared enough to risk his own security for someone else's dream. That is the minimum, and it is remarkable how many families fail to meet it. Marcus called me last month to tell me he is expanding a private dining room in the space adjacent to the main restaurant. He sent me the contractor's estimate before he signed it. He asked for my thoughts on the timeline. He called me after the meeting with the architect to tell me it went well. These phone calls, these ordinary, unremarkable, Tuesday afternoon phone calls, in which my son treats me like a person whose opinion matters, are worth more to me than any grand opening ever could have been. I am 64 years old. I have buried a wife and inspected more bridges than I can count, and sat across from my own son while his marriage showed its cracks under the weight of my questions. I am not a dramatic man. I do not seek confrontation, but I have learned this. Love without accountability is not love. It is convenience. And the moment you become convenient to someone, you have already begun to disappear from their life. If you are a parent who has given money to a child, given your savings, your retirement, your security, and you are beginning to feel that something is not right, I want you to hear me clearly. Trust your instincts. They are not paranoia. They are data. Pull the records, read the invoices, ask the questions that make people uncomfortable. And if your child loves you, truly loves you, they will sit at that table with you and go through the numbers line by line, even when it is painful, especially when it is painful. Because that is what respect looks like. Not a ceremony, not a ribbon cutting, not a toast with champagne. Respect is a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon where your son says, "Dad, I want your opinion before I sign this." That is all I ever wanted. And I nearly lost it by being too polite to ask.